Leon Weinstein is our guest today. Leon, hello. We're glad to see you.
Good afternoon. Thank you as well. I'm always glad to come on Politeka.
Just before our recording, ASG Press reported that the White House has officially informed ASG Press that it considers the war in Iran to be over. This statement was made despite the presence of American troops in the region. Leon, what do you have to say?
That's pure semantics, nothing like that. The thing is, today on May 1st, it ends. The legal 2-month period for presidents to conduct military actions without Congress's approval. Congress hasn't given such permissions, and actually I think no one even approached Congress about this. And so, according to the good old tradition, though I don't like it, I'm being a bit ironic here, the good old tradition of the presidents of the United States over the past 50, 60, 70 years is that they deceive, play semantic games with Congress, the people, and themselves. For example, when Kennedy imposed the blockade on Cuba, in order not to fall under this very act, what we call, so to speak, the act of declaring war, he called it inspections at the approaches. And we say, wait a second, is that a blockade? No, what? A blockade is one thing, inspections at the approaches are another, and for that I shouldn't need any permissions. So when Clinton was bombing Bucharest, and by the way, he blew up the bridges, power stations, everything to hell there, right? He declared that it wasn't a military operation, but that it was called the protection of the Muslim minority. He asks if it involves a military operation, but the answer is no, it's only protection. In other words, yes, several times under different presidents, 5 presidents did this, including Obama and Ronald Reagan. 5 presidents did this several times. Members of Congress tried to take it to court, but the courts don't want to get involved in this matter. It's a very tricky situation, so the courts refuse. In other words, you just call something by a different name. You say nothing like that happened, you didn't attack anyone, there's no war, so you should see this as pure deception.
Yes, since many people wondered whether this statement is actually reality, or if it's just some legal trick, as you described, so that this 60-day, yes, to get around the deadline. It also reminds me of that, what was it called? The War Powers Resolution, right, from 1973. Thank you for the clarification. Now we'll have a clearer understanding of what's really going on. But on the other hand, is this possibility of declaring the war ended really a strategic achievement that can now, to use that term, be sold to Congress, sold to your voters, and then move forward to take advantage of such a political maneuver?
No, not yet, because the President of the United States and the United States itself can't just walk away from this the way things stand today. Because having completely defeated Iran militarily, they have not achieved 2 things. First, they haven't managed to take away the enriched uranium and stop it. They only stopped it for about 10 or 15 years. Probably, I don't know how long restoration will take. I think it will take a very long time, and they haven't eliminated the possibility. They have not stopped Iran from being able to close the Strait of Hormuz whenever it wants. So these 2 issues must somehow be resolved, and at this moment it doesn't matter how, they just need to be resolved. And from the perspective of our internal American politics, they must be resolved during May. I once said here before May 15, but let's extend it, let's say until the end of May, right? By the end of May, it has to be resolved simply because we have an agenda that the administration is obliged to follow, namely the beginning of the attack on the Democratic Party before the elections, the start of, so to speak, very high-profile proceedings. And it's necessary that there is no war so that it doesn't distract attention from this. And recovery, so to speak, with prices moving downward rather than upward as they are now, And with gas prices stabilizing, just yesterday I saw while passing a gas station, probably in Beverly Hills, everything costs more there. But still, diesel there was somewhere around $8 per gallon, which is about $2 per, well, approximately $2 per liter, 2.10 per liter, which is absolutely outrageous. It's not like that everywhere, but it is in California. But our regular gasoline, which I use, but it's highly refined, costs $6. That's the price per gallon. So that's 30% more than, frankly, what we paid before. And that's why it really hurts. And so for the Republicans to get out of this in November, they need things to change by September. Let's say instead of $6, we now have 4, and across the country, instead of 4, it's, I don't know, 2.80, 3.15 at most. Gasoline prices are crucial for us since they affect everything else. In general, the administration has been put in a position where they have to somehow resolve this and present it as a victory. Well, actually, we already set Iran back by 10 to 15, maybe even more years. And the only thing is, if we go down this path, we have to smash their ports, destroy their oil terminals, and all sorts of things. Deprive them of the opportunity to make money so that they can't use that money to restore their military-industrial potential. And if Trump decides that he's going to end the war in a way that the Israelis won't call a victory, and of course the Israelis have their own ideas about this. So if he decides to go down that path, then we'll bomb that very island. There are several islands there with all sorts of oil loading facilities. And we'll bomb everything related to Iran's ability to earn a lot of money from oil and gas in the coming years.
In this context, there's one interesting statement. We'll try to analyze it now and break it down in more detail. There is a TV host, journalist, and blogger who was previously a member of the State Duma of the Russian Federation, but now he is an opposition figure. This is Alexander Nevzorov. And he described a story on his Telegram channel that at a Senate hearing, responding to a question from Roger Wicker about whether the Russian Federation is really taking actions to undermine the successful U.S. operation in Iran, the chairman of the U.S. Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Dan Kane, he answered in the affirmative, but without revealing any details. He stated that he does indeed have information about how Russia might be helping Iran in the war. And now Alexander Nevzorov is asking a question. He says, I wonder if Trump was informed, and in his usual manner he says it feels like Putin has bewitched Trump with a love potion. He explains it with one thing. He puts it in brackets, dementia. The illogical behavior of the US president is impossible. The bewitched Trump, for some reason, trusts the words of the crazy dictator instead of his own intelligence services. And we ask this question, Leon, and to you as well. Why does the Trump administration, according to many, continue to show more trust in Putin than in the conclusions of its own military intelligence?
I apologize, but from my point of view, Nevzorov is the one who's constantly drinking the potion, but that's not the point of the conversation. I'm not sure about one thing. If you could explain it a bit in your review, I'll try to answer. In what sense does he not trust intelligence? Did they report to Trump, but he didn't believe them?
Well, that didn't happen, right? And moreover, we don't know all the details of the relationship between Trump and the intelligence agencies, unfortunately. Nevzorov reached this conclusion, especially after the recent Trump-Putin conversation. That's basically what he said.
That is, Sasha, we used to know each other back in the day. We talked, so Sasha. Alexander, he draws the strangest conclusion. He says something like, soon it will rain, so a right angle is 90 degrees. So both are correct, but it's just not clear how one follows from the other. And how did the reports from the American minister and commander from the headquarters saying that Russia is indeed helping America turn into the idea that they don't tell Trump or that Trump trusts Putin more than them? I just can't wrap my head around this, but never mind. I know these are rhetorical questions you probably can't answer, but if you can, go ahead. But it seems to me that what they said in the Senate, that yes, Russia is helping, is not proof that Trump doesn't believe them. Right. Graham, look.
We can simply add in the context of this statement by Alexander Glebovich, we do remember how this happened repeatedly, whether it was about Iran or about Russian hackers who helped win the elections. And Trump had a rather ambiguous attitude toward certain statements made by his own intelligence agencies, which kind of hinted or suggested that he didn't take these statements all that seriously.
In other words, they take a past example, like Trump crossing the street and stepping in a puddle. So now every time he crosses the street, he steps in a puddle. I get the idea. Okay, good. So I understand the logic. Now let me tell you the following. When Trump said that, in this sense, he trusts Putin more than his own intelligence agencies, it turned out he was absolutely right. We have a lot of evidence that the intelligence agencies deliberately lied, and it was on Obama's orders. If you want, we can go deeper into this matter, as Gorbachev used to say. And right now, we have a huge case going on about this. I mean, in Florida, a grand jury has already been assembled to deal with this, and the first arrests have already started happening. So there was an order from Obama to lie to the whole world. We know what he found out, we know who Trump found out from, and that's why he said, in this sense, I trust Putin. Now, speaking of which, let's move on to the question, to a serious question. Is Russia involved in Iran's resistance to America? It would be strange if it wasn't involved. What, isn't America involved in Ukraine's resistance to Russia? Of course it is involved. We're not sending soldiers there, but look at the weapons, look at the Starlink connections and so on. Who is providing all that? Naturally, it's America that's providing it. So can't Russia do the same thing, but in reverse in Iran? Of course it does, naturally, and China does too. And Trump knows this perfectly well, and everyone else knows it too. They don't tell us the details. They don't tell us exactly how or why they don't talk about it. That's their business, after all. It's a military secret. But of course it helps.
You see, you've just given us an interesting idea to think about. Let the viewers react to it as well. Let's get back to your statement. You promised to elaborate on it in more detail. So, how did intelligence play a bad joke on Obama in the story you mentioned?
No, not a bad joke on Obama. January 16, January 9, 2017. 2016 or 2017, Obama, and he was still president until January 20, gathered all his so-called war council, meaning all the people who participated in the Defense Council. This included the CIA, the head of the FBI, the head of the Central Intelligence Agency of the United States of America, the vice president, and I don't want to keep listing everyone, but basically everyone who was involved in defense. And the CIA reported, and we have all the documents regarding this, the CIA reported the following. Our investigations into Russia's interference in the elections concluded that we came to the conclusion that there was no interference in the elections. Russian hackers did not participate on either side. Rather, Russian official hackers sympathized with Clinton, with an explanation as to why. Later, if you want, I can explain why. That's the decision they made. But they 100% did not help Trump. At that moment, Obama, there are already 2 witnesses, stopped the meeting and said, I would like you to revise this report before it goes any further. Brennan, who was in charge of the CIA at that time, asked how exactly they should revise it. They revised it to say that Russian intelligence and Russia were trying to support Trump. This was all openly discussed at the meeting. Nothing is recorded because this meeting is classified. That is, it is recorded somewhere, somehow, but it is not made available to us. But we already have evidence, both written and from 2 people who were present there and so on. And Brennan said, all my analysts came to this conclusion. Obama said, make it so they come to a different conclusion. Today, Brennan said, I have to send this report to the future president because I'm required to send the report on the same day to both the current president and what is called the president-elect, to which Obama said, delay it. And so, on the 16th, a new report came out, which stated that Russia was actively involved and so on, and it landed on the desk. And right away, Comey brought it straight to the desk. Now it wasn't Brennan, but Comey who brought it to Trump, put it on the table and said, don't worry, we know it's not true. There. And then Trump asked, are you, as he said, are you investigating me? To which Comey, lying, said, no, what are you talking about? So he lied. We know that too. We know it from his own testimony and his book. So, no, of course not. We're not investigating you at all. I'll protect you because I know you had nothing to do with it and so on. So this story has been unfolding for quite a long time, piece by piece. And now in Florida. Why in Florida? Because Trump was living in Florida at that time and all of this was coming down on him. He's a Florida resident. And that's why in Florida, at the place where he was harmed, they assembled what's called a grand jury. It's 23 people, unlike the usual 12, and out of those, 18 vote, but all 23 gather. And this jury reviewed all the documents. They worked with them for almost a year, and now, 2 weeks ago, they issued a decision that they had received enough documentation to be convinced that there were forgeries, deceptions, and that there was a conspiracy. And regarding this, a case was opened for conspiracy to overthrow the legitimate government of the United States of America, with the former president of the United States of America, Barack Hussein Obama, at the head of this conspiracy. It's written as Barack Hussein Obama. He didn't like using his middle name, but that's how it's listed. And so to speak, this case is under investigation. As I already said, first subpoenas. Subpoenas are summonses. So Mr. Comey has already received one. Then the person who leaked information from him received one too, and Comey said he never leaked any information to the press. That professor, his friend, who leaked information to the press, has also already received a subpoena. So we have a case brewing here, and by the end of May it should blossom, let's say in full bloom, or whatever you want to call it, a case about a conspiracy to overthrow the government. That's the death penalty for us.
What's that?
Death penalty.
Death penalty. This is a very interesting story.
Yes.
And in open sources, I think we can find as much as we want.
I can do that for you. Let's finish up and I'll just send it to you. I don't know, there are sources that you probably read yourself, like CNN, MSNBC, the New York Times, and so on, where this is carefully hidden. In all the other sources, well, I don't know. If you're interested, I can send you a few links to people who are directly involved in the investigation.
I'd appreciate it. We would be interested. We can also share it with our viewers. Friends, feel free to write to us. We can arrange that. And continuing our conversation about the contacts between Trump and Putin, how do you assess these recent contacts, their phone conversation, which reportedly lasted 90 minutes? And at the same time, the Iranian issue was discussed. According to reports, Putin publicly expressed support for Iran's heroic struggle. It's an interesting message, yes. While talking to Trump, the one who is bombing Iran, Putin addresses Trump and says, well, support for Iran's heroic struggle for sovereignty. But doesn't this create the impression that Trump is allowing Russia to play a role, I would even say not just as a mediator, but as some kind of legitimate interlocutor? Thank you.
But aren't we doing the same thing in Ukraine? It seems to me that we also keep saying that the heroic people of Ukraine are defending themselves against the Russian attack. The difference is that we believe this needs to be stopped and ended, not by killing people. But we keep saying all the time, America, that the heroic people, we don't like your government, the Ukrainian government, but the people themselves are, so to speak, fine. Look, they're heroes, truly heroes. So the thing is, 80% of Ukraine's population doesn't want Russia on Ukrainian territory, while 80% of Iran's population wants America on Iranian territory. So that's the only difference, nothing else.
You mentioned that we don't like the Ukrainian government. Yes. So who do you like? Thank you.
What do you mean?
Well, if there is hatred towards them,
So, do you mean the world governments?
well, yes.
Well, Milei, Netanyahu, well, I don't know. So to speak, these are the people I like, and everyone else, I only like his food, not otherwise.
I'm asking because, considering the context of this conversation and Nevzorov's earlier statement, many people come to the conclusion that for Trump, his communication with Putin is a strategy of pretending to be a friend. That is, with Russia, we kind of communicate, we maintain relations or, communication in order to solve broader issues. But, it's not like what you described earlier. It's not like we actually listen, but we pretend in order to get our own benefit.
And I even think that we don't even pretend. It's just that from the point of view of the United States government, excuse me, is the barking bothering you? Because I can try. No, it's all fine. I have 2 puppies, and if they decide to bark, it's really difficult. Yeah. So we're not pretending. We believe that Russia is one of the major players on the world stage. First of all, it's a huge territory. Secondly, it has a vast amount of the world's resources. Thirdly, there are borders, access points, and so on. Fourthly, they have a huge stockpile of nuclear weapons. So all these 4 points make this country, let's say, a player that deserves attention. In the same way, China is a player that deserves attention, and there are a few others, let's say, smaller ones. And we believe that a normal world order cannot be, let's say, organized if Russia does not take part in it. Do we have different views of the world? Yes. Do we have different views on life? Yes. We don't approve of much of what they do? Yes. They don't approve of much of what we do? Yes. But at the same time, they are a strong country with solid potential, and it would be very foolish to pretend that they don't exist, that they aren't important. They are important.
At the same time, if you believe the media, we are now witnessing a kind of political ping pong. Iran recently conveyed new peace proposals through intermediaries, including Pakistan. This involves the opening of the Hormuz Strait. In return for lifting the blockade, the nuclear issue would be delayed until later, as well as demands for reparations and security guarantees. According to reports from Al Jazeera, Axios, and Reuters, Trump, for his part, expressed dissatisfaction with this proposal. Why? Well, without an immediate solution to the nuclear issue, there will be no deal. To what extent do these Iranian proposals reflect the real weakness of the regime? To what extent is this a tactical game between factions inside Iran, which many are writing about now, meaning a war between factions and a shadow center of power?
No one knows if there is a war between factions there. It's all pure speculation. And the fact that they say one thing, then say another, and pretend that they're fighting each other there, doesn't necessarily mean that's really the case. That's just the picture we imagine. Whether it's true or not, we don't know. I've lived in the East for quite a long time. That means you can never trust a single word anyone says. Judge by actions and always check if they're reaching into your pocket with the other hand. Persians, Iranians are a very ancient nation. They've been negotiating for a very long time. They love to negotiate. They know how to do it. And when they negotiate, they always have not just 3 things in mind, but 33. That's why we don't know what's going on there. Now, what do we know? We know that the people who are sitting 300 or 500 meters underground absolutely don't care whether everything on the surface gets destroyed or not. They just don't care at all. So, just like your leadership, like the Russian leadership, like, well, most of the American leadership. Here with Trump, we had a situation. He's a very atypical leader, so that's a special story. But they absolutely and completely don't care about how the people will live before, after, or instead of that. They are absolutely and completely uninterested in anything else. The only thing they care about is not being hanged and not losing their power. Nothing else matters to them. The Iranian authorities, no matter how they are divided, into 24, into 2 camps, into 16, or who knows, maybe just 1 camp. They invented the second one themselves and pretend it exists. The only things they care about are 2 things. First, that they not be killed, and second, that they remain in power. They can only do this by staying in their bunkers as long as possible, running out, shooting, blowing something up, running back in, closing the door, and we can't get to them. We could get to them only if we sent 150,000 soldiers there, but then a lot of people would die, and there is no way Congress would ever agree to that, and Trump wouldn't go for it either. And besides us, there is no force that would be ready to go there, or even could go there and clear them out. Their local army isn't enough, and they don't want to act. The local unarmed population isn't enough. There aren't that many Kurds. And as for the Azerbaijanis, there are about 20 million Azerbaijanis living there. They have weapons and so on, but they won't go into Iran, into Tehran to clear things out, or go along the various shores to clean all this up. So they know they can stay there as long as they have enough food, water, and electricity. And I think they've been building this for years. How long? 30 years they spent. 60 billion or maybe 160 billion, nobody knows for sure. And there's a whole system there, entire cities, so they can hide there as long as they want. I think it's a game. They pretend to have different factions. Well, maybe someone really does want to surrender on American terms so that, so to speak, they can stay in power. And to hell with it, well, Venezuela. Some might think that if that happens, people will just catch him and hang him by his feet for shooting 35, maybe even 40,000 people there who were demonstrating, who were holding peaceful protests. So it's quite possible that at this level there is some kind of disagreement, but I think it will be insanely difficult to knock them off this course. They absolutely don't care what we bomb. They don't care about anything at all. The main thing for them is to survive and keep their power, and I think they will be able to do that.
By the way, many critics say that Trump is missing the opportunity to freeze the conflict and focus on China instead. What do you think is the hardline approach to completely destroy Iran's nuclear infrastructure, and the actions currently being taken justified even if it prolongs the war? No,
the war is much more important to us. To us in America, our domestic policy is much more important, which actually becomes global later than the specific situation with Iran. Iran is a separate issue. Iran needed to be stopped, in my opinion. How it was done, whether it was right or wrong, it's not for me to judge, as I don't have all the facts, so to speak. I don't have all the information. But based on the information I had, it was necessary, it had to be done. There was a moment when all U.S. presidents promised to do it, but no one did. The goal was to try to destroy everything possible in Iran. Iraq had a reactor, they hit it, and it was gone. In Syria, the North Koreans were building a reactor. They destroyed it, and it was gone. But in Iran, they had been preparing for this for many decades, and everything was much more spread out in different places. So just destroying it, like the Americans and Israelis did in January, was not enough. So it was necessary. When a person tells you, I'm going to buy a gun now, and as soon as I get it and the bullets, I'll kill your children. Of course, you can take it as a harmless joke, but I wouldn't. I would try to, as they say, hit him over the head, even though he hasn't shot at my children yet. But he has already shot at other people's children. He showed how he shoots at other people's children, but he hasn't shot at mine yet, so I wouldn't wait until he actually buys that gun. I would try to get rid of him, maybe set his house on fire or do something else. That's why I believe that attacking Iran was necessary. It's treachery, that's what it is. They weren't obligated to. But it's treacherous that Europe didn't go along with us. Because Iran promised to do the same things to European capitals that it promised to do to Washington. Whether he would have done it is another matter. He simply threatened to kill my children, so he had to die. So it was the right thing to do, it was right. So to speak, whether it was technically right, I don't know. But it was right to stop them, yes. Now we've set them back by 10 or 15 years. Maybe that's enough. Maybe in 10 years we'll go again and set them back another 10 years. I don't know.
Continuation. The reason I'm asking about the risks and whether it's all justified is because you've already talked about it using your own example. And there was information that commercial oil reserves in the US are depleting rather quickly due to the blockade of Iran and the closure of the Hormuz Strait. Asian buyers are switching to American oil on Trump's advice, which, by the way, is already leading to rising gasoline prices and the risk of fuel shortages. How do you explain to an ordinary American voter why America first, which had been the earlier line on Middle East policy, so far just results in higher prices at American gas stations and airports?
Well, that's the biggest problem. That's why I said that Trump must deal with this within a month, and within 2 months start moving toward lowering gasoline prices, because it's hard to explain to someone in Iowa or Montana who comes home from work and stops to get gas and suddenly pays 1.5 times more than he used to. He doesn't understand it, because it's a blow to his tractor and to the cost of his wheat, which he then has to transport to the city using that gasoline or whatever else. In other words, it eats into his profits, and he's forced to earn much less. I have some acquaintances who own a company with heavy, large trucks, right? They say they've broken even for 2 months. They're still fulfilling their orders and not raising prices, hoping this ends. They said they can break even for 1, 2, or even 3 months, right? But after that, we'll either have to stop or raise prices. So everyone wants this to end. Everyone was ready to endure, ready for whatever. But life inside the country is more important to people than something so distant. He promised first to deal with atomic bombs, with Israel, then something else, then with America. Well, like, a farmer in Iowa doesn't really care about what Iran promised. That's why he elects a president, so the president can think about that. But at some point, when people see twice a week that they're paying more at the gas station, and then go shopping with their wife on Sunday and find out they paid 1.5 times more than last Sunday, it starts to annoy them.
That's the moment, I think, as they say, when pocketbook issues win out. Yeah.
It always wins. Pocketbook issues always win.
But at the same time, I started with one topic. There is also a Wall Street Journal publication that reports that as of March 31, 2006, the US national debt exceeded 100% of GDP. And here we also come to the same logical question, I think, which is what? Doesn't the Trump administration then risk repeating the mistakes of previous administrations when external or geopolitical ambitions simply led to uncontrollable consequences? Well, in the current context, for example, to an increase in debt.
Yes, I absolutely agree with this conclusion. Wall Street Journal, because by solving one problem, as they say, we end up creating many others for ourselves. Another thing is, again, from my point of view, and I'm not a farmer in Iowa, from my point of view, what was happening there in Iran could have become such a huge problem that it absolutely had to be addressed, even at the cost of what is happening now. But now it needs to be ended. And either stop or say, okay, we've accomplished it, we've stopped Iran for 10 years, we'll decide what to do next in 10 years, and now we'll take care of our own business.
When Trump promises to reveal data about UFOs, don't you think he's just trying to distract people from internal problems?
No.
Oh.
No one will escape internal problems. Nothing can overshadow gas prices and the cost of basic goods. No.
No.
You can't turn UFOs into opium of the people.
In conclusion, your opinion on, if we can call it that, Trump's resentment, but we see the consequences. He kind of promises that he will withdraw American troops from Germany, Italy, and Spain. He justifies this by saying these countries didn't help the US in the Iranian operation. Based on his statement, how much is this a classic Trump tactic, meaning a way to test allies? And, well, excuse me, I don't mean to offend anyone, but is this just talk, right? Or is it a real strategic reassessment of presence and an actual plan?
You know, I tried to understand, and I even specifically asked these questions to artificial intelligence in different ways. And what's so bad for Germany and Italy if half of them leave? He's not planning to leave anyone there at all, right? He's planning to take half of them out. Actually, the U.S. concept has changed. What used to be called Monroe, now Trump has called Donroe, meaning Donald Roe, right? And this is a shift of attention from the European continent to our immediate neighborhood, meaning Latin America. And so to say it's routine and it was supposed to happen anyway, the reduction in numbers. How many are we stationing there for you? We're keeping 70, 80, 90,000 people in Germany. Why? Well, why? If they were at least paying us for this, I would understand, right? Well, okay, fine, we'd be mercenaries, but as it is, we're spending our own money for what? So, to protect? Well, it's clear what we're protecting. We're protecting our own ships, our own routes, and projecting our powers, so to speak, and everything else. All of that is clear. But what I don't understand is how we're going to punish Italy by taking, say, 20 or 30,000 soldiers stationed there if we take, say, 15 of them out of Italy. So that's probably a downside, yes? Well, there are towns near our bases. They basically live off the fact that American soldiers are there and make money from it. I understand it's a couple of billion, right? But as for something bad happening in Italy, I don't understand what that would be. Maybe something bad will happen. Maybe that's why Trump wants them to actually give 5%, what they promised, to give 5% of their GDP for defense. Because, I don't know, well, they took them away, so what next?
On the other hand, if you analyze it, the European Union is gradually losing two factors. The first one was economic at one time, meaning cheap energy resources from the Russian Federation. The second one, which we are witnessing now, is security. Security, which was provided by the United States of America, and essentially that's what maintained Europe's financial success for decades.
England has huge offshore oil reserves. Norway is swimming in oil, Denmark is swimming in oil, and in Norway you could say communism has arrived because they pay half of all expenses for people, so you basically don't need to pay for anything. Because of this, life there has become boring and dull. Nobody leaves, and nobody goes there. It's boring, gray, so to speak, and so on, but at least you could say people are well fed. England has large oil reserves, so why aren't they being developed? I don't know, maybe the sheikhs bribed them, maybe Russia, maybe they've all gone crazy, maybe something else. So, in other words, they don't want cheap energy, they want to be dependent on Russia and buy expensive energy. Why, I don't know.
Friends, if you know, write in the comments why that is. Leon Weinstein was a guest on this program. Leon, thank you very much for the conversation, for your perspective. See you again on Politeka.
Goodbye.